live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and blasttheradio.com. This is the Lowell Green Show. The number to call and be heard around the world is 613-413-2217. Or email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. And now, here is Lowell Green.
On biofuels. Do you know what biofuels are?
Made from living things, I would assume.
Almost all from corn.
Okay, so not fossil. That's the difference. Okay.
So this is posing an increasing problem. This is pretty scary. I've done a lot of research on this, and what I have discovered is very, very disturbing. Not only what's happening today, but what Trudeau has planned for tomorrow. Today in Ontario, 5% of diesel fuel must be biofuels. 10% of gasoline must be biofuels. But it doesn't end there. By 2030, 50% of all gasoline sold in Ontario must be biofuels. Goes up to 13% 2028. In other words, year by year by year, the increasing amount of biofuels goes into effect in the province of Ontario, and in fact in most of Canada. So let me repeat that. 5% of all diesel fuel sold in Ontario, different provinces have slightly different formulas, but I'm talking Ontario. 5% of diesel fuel, biofuels. 10% of gasoline, biofuels. In 2 years' time, it goes up to 11%, then 13%, and gradually increases until 2030, when 50% of all gasoline must be biofuels. Well, you say, so what? This is a serious problem. Biofuels almost exclusively is corn. Do you know, just to give you an idea of what's happening here, in the United States, as you know, the United States is a major, major grower of corn, the world's largest grower of corn. Today in the United States, 40% of all the corn grown is not for human food. The land is not being used to grow other crops which humans can eat. 40% of all corn grown in the United States is now being used in biofuels, and I suspect the figure is about the same in Canada. If this is true, 40% of all corn, or very close to it, grown here, is on land that is not available for human food. Well, corn, to a degree, can be used for human food. There are a number of products we make from corn. There's no question about it. Cornflakes, of course, comes to mind, cornstarch, etc. But the point I'm trying to make here, so we have, and farmers are getting very, very disturbed here. They're pointing out that, hey, the world needs more Canadian food, not less. So Trudeau is legislating that very soon, perhaps as early as next year, farmers will have to reduce fertilizers by 30%. Almost inevitably, this means 30% less crops. 30% less corn, 30% less soybeans, 30% less vegetables, etc., etc.
Wow.
But on top of that, increasingly, the land that could be used for soybeans or other food, much more used by humans, increasingly, this land is being taken up not for human consumption, but to put in your gas tank so that we cannot buy Alberta oil and gas. This is where this is going. I didn't really, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I've been on the farm most of my life, gone to McDonald Agricultural College, all the rest of it. I had no idea that biofuels were consuming so much of the crops grown by Ontario farmers. There's another aspect, and that is that as the demand for biofuels increases, up goes the price of corn. That's just capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the reasons why the cost of food continues to escalate. More and more farmers, I don't know if you notice or not, more and more farmers are growing corn. The reason that they are growing corn is there is a huge market, growing market for biofuels. As the price of corn goes up, so does many other things of price because there's less land available for other crops. Less land for wheat, for barley, for soybeans, etc. These crops that are primarily for human consumption. I'm trying to keep this simple so that I understand the concept is a little difficult. But what it amounts to is that increasingly, with a lack of fertilizer, an increasing amount of biofuels, less and less farmland in Ontario and in Canada, for that matter, is being made available to grow crops for humans. Less wheat, less barley, less oats, etc., etc. I could go right. Less soybeans, etc. Less vegetables, less land available. The more land that we use for corn to supply fuel for our automobiles, the less land there is for other crops that are required for humans. We're headed for a serious situation. If it's true, the United States, 40% of the corn crop is biofuels. It's got to be the same here, 40%. Can you imagine? I mean, by 2030, and many of you will still be alive. Thank God I won't be. But 2030, 50% of all gasoline will have to be biofuels, according to this mad man who runs our country today, Justin Trudeau. If 50% of gasoline has got to be biofuels, that means essentially that every stalk of corn in this country grown will not be available for human, but will be used for gasoline. There will be no, and not only that, but more and more land will have to be taken up by corn to provide gasoline, while billions of barrels of oil sit in the land in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and we can't get it out, can't get it to market. This is all part of the green plan, folks. This plan. I don't know how carefully that that the officials, the government, has thought this through. If you've got some more questions here, please feel free. I've spent most of the morning researching this, and I was absolutely shocked. There is what prompted this, to be honest with you. There is a very good letter to the editor of excuse me, editor of the Sun today, written by a woman who has a large farm in Alberta. And she points out that, in fact, with less fertilizer, there will be less crops. And she raises the issue of biofuels. She says increasingly farmers are raising crops not for humans, but for gasoline, and that this is only going to increase. I don't know where we're headed here, but I don't think it's a pretty picture. If you have any comments or any questions or concerns on that, excuse me, my voice is really giving out here. I'm very disturbed. Like it's almost as if the country is being run by people who simply don't understand the basics of science, don't understand the basics of agriculture. And this is it's not, don't forget that Canada supplies not only its own population with food, but supplies much of the world. I mean, our wheat and oats, barley, etc., is shipped around the world. It's in great demand. And parts of the world now are facing famine with the war in Ukraine, etc. You know the story. So rather than taking steps to increase the ability to farms to produce more food, we are taking steps by law in this country to reduce the amount of food, lowering fertilizer and growing more and more crops, not for food, but for gasoline. Ladies and gentlemen, does this make any sense to you? How have we allowed a government to intrude in our lives to this point where they are now dictating how much food we can grow here by law? You know, when Pierre Poilievre says we got to reduce the gatekeepers, well, it seems to me, here's a good example. We have gatekeepers. We've got officials now in this country that are now restricting the amount of food that we can grow. And indirectly, at least, dictating the kind of food that we grow. As the demand for biofuels, corn, continues to grow, then more and more land will be taken up with corn, not for human consumption, not even for livestock consumption. At least if you feed corn to cattle, you can kill the cattle and you eat the cattle. Provides meat, right? human food, one way or the other. But if you take the corn and instead of feeding it to livestock, instead of creating cornflakes, etc., with it, you create gasoline, then increasingly you are decreasing the amount of food available for human beings, not just in Canada, but around the world. And this is the government we have in this country claiming to be the great protectors, we've got your back, etc. John, are people understanding what I am
Yeah.
saying here? Is there
Oh,
any
yeah.
concern here? Let's hear what people are having to say. If you've got some questions or need some clarification, I'll do my best. Okay, I'm not an expert, but I've done a fair amount of research on this. Actually, if you just drive around, you may notice that more and more corn is being grown. Now,
Well,
there's not.
I
Go
have
ahead.
noticed that, and I said to you before we got on the air, I said my assumption was most of that would be kettle corn, wouldn't it? And
Well,
you don't believe that's true,
well, no. If 40% of the corn in the United States is biofuels, it's got to be the same here. Our
right?
requirements for biofuels, I think, are even higher than the United States. There's a good chance that close to 50% of our corn is now being used for biofuels. And it's going to be obviously as the requirement for more and more biofuels. I mean, I'm not even dealing with what this does to your engine. I don't want to get into that today. Many mechanics are concerned about this, but let's just talk about it from food production.
Right.
30% less food because we have 30% less fertilizer, and God knows how much less food production because instead of growing food for humans, even if it's fed to livestock, we are instead growing biofuels for gasoline to create gasoline. That's what we're doing here. John, what sort of reaction are we getting?
All right, we're getting lots of reaction, and thank you for that. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitch. Wherever you would ordinarily post a comment is where you can do that, and I'll pop it up on the screen. Whatever I don't get a chance to
Good.
do on the show, I pass on to Lowell. And you can call and you can text as well, 613-413-2217. Let's begin with a text from Ruth. She says, I watched Canada Grow on CPAC the other day, and it was so interesting. They claim that Trudeau's radical ideas are far beyond what the UN believes is okay, and they even used quotes from the United Nations in that program. Thomas says, hello from someone in rural Canada whose life just got a whole lot more expensive last week, and the winter fuel sea lift came in. The price at the pump is now $2.52 a liter. It's going to cost me over $100 to go out and hunt country food, which I used to offset the outrageous prices in a few stores we do have up here. Oh, and that GST rebate, quote unquote, is as useful as tits on a bull. I've only ever received one check since that scam was conjured up.
Okay, let's deal with the topic here, though, please. We've dealt with that's fine. I appreciate the call, but I want to start the public to get concerned and at least interested in what biofuels are and what it means, what the future holds. So I'll ask this directly:
Mhm.
Are you concerned that we will have 30% less food, more or less, because of less fertilizer? And less land devoted to human food and instead devoted to gasoline for our vehicles. All of this in an effort to lower emissions and prevent us from using our own oil and gas. Does any of this make any sense to you? Have you got any questions, any concerns in this? Go ahead, John, please.
So Glenn was being a bit of a smartass with his comment, but it speaks to something I had too. He says, don't forget that there will be no gas vehicles by then, problem solved. But we're hearing the government now speaking out both sides of their mouth, aren't they? We're going all electric, but now we're focusing on biofuel. Where are we headed here?
Well, don't forget, there's also a plan to create more electricity by burning biofuels. If you check IESO, you will see on any given day some of the energy produced to create electricity is from the burning of biofuels. So I haven't mentioned this. I don't want to confuse the issue, but what the plan is to have more and more biofuels used for gasoline and
Right.
also to create electricity. It's what we're looking at is a situation where the more and more land is going to be taken over by corn for biofuels for use to create electricity and power our vehicles. So I'll just deal with that.
All right, back to the comments on Facebook. Coraline says, very concerned, especially when Trudeau plans to bring in 450,000 more immigrants per year. will be intense and we will be starving, she says. Carrie says, yes, we worry about this. It makes absolutely no sense in her household whatsoever. Considering the world hunger problem, says Anne, I find it immoral to be using corn for fuel for cars instead of feeding humans.
Very good. That's it. You've hit the nail on the head. What we are talking about here, and the simplest form is, instead of growing corn for humans, because if you feed it to cattle, that's for humans as well. Instead of growing corn for human food, we are growing corn to put gasoline in your car. And the reason we want biofuels in your car is we don't want you burning oil. It's all part of the global emissions, etc., the green energy. This is all part of the green energy fanaticism that's overtaking this country. Go ahead, John.
To YouTube, and Tony says, of course I'm concerned. If you're not concerned, you're either dead or in a deep, deep sleep. Kellyanne says there's so much money people are making off all this green energy crap, even if it's obvious that there's no real benefit. These environmental idiots do not care as long as their wallets are getting fatter. Anne is back with another comment. She says, I will just add this biofuel issue to my long list of concerns. Out to Saskatchewan. And Murray says, no food and no fuel is part of the big plan. I've been telling you all about this conspiracy for a long, long time.
I don't think this is not a conspiracy in the usual sense. This is an attempt by this government to somehow or other have zero emissions. This government has adopted as its religion the eradication of fossil fuels. And part of that is to have biofuels. We've already gone through that. This is not a conspiracy. This is a religion. This is the new religion in this country, green energy. And this is what it entails. Go ahead, John.
I have to be pleading ignorance here. Is there not, when you burn biofuels, is there not exhaust from that as well? Is there not
the emissions? The emissions.
That's what we're thinking.
Yeah, the emissions apparently are considerably less. Now, that's a very good. I haven't had a chance to actually. Some of you, I would hope, would research that. But yeah, if you burn biofuels, there's got to be some emissions. So how much this really reduces the emission, I have no idea. And of course, the overall question is, at 1.6% of the world's emissions, why are we doing this? Go ahead.
Coraline says, if we're concerned about loss of land for food, Ottawa's turbine dreams will take up about 48,000 acres, based on 12,000 acres for the 29 turbines in North Stormont. Michelle says, sorry, did you want in there?
Well, no, actually, she's making a good point. Between the solar panels, wind turbines, more and more land for corn, for fuel.
Right.
I mean, what's going to be left to grow apples? I don't know.
The very land we're trying to protect, we're covering now with wind turbines and solar panels, and now corn to grow as fuel.
By the way, I have to tell you this. I know you get sick of it, but at 1 o'clock today, if you go to IESO, you will see at 1 o'clock today, even though it's a nice sunny day, it's a beautiful sunny day, chilly, there's a nice breeze, the total amount of energy, electricity being produced by wind and solar at 1 today was 3.87%. This is what it's all about, folks. This is why we're going to burn fossil fuels and et cetera, et cetera. We're going to get production from wind and solar up to 5% if we're lucky. Go ahead.
Chris is on the phone, 613-413-2217. Chris, go ahead. You're on with Lowell Green.
Hi, Lowell. I thought I'd break the news to you that most of the corn you actually see in our area, unless it's near dairy farm, which is used as silage,
yes,
I'd say 75% of it goes to ethanol or green.
I'm sorry. I'm having trouble hearing you. 75% you say is being used for biofuels?
In our area, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Were you surprised to find out that in the United States, 40% of the total corn crop is now biofuel? Would that surprise you?
Not at all. I'm pretty familiar with this subject. I was a past cropper, so I know how it all works. Most of our corn goes to an ethanol plant right in Prescott there. And it's probably 75%.
Well, I mean, if you're using corn, as I say, for ethanol, you're not using corn to feed animals. You're not using corn to create human food. You're using it to put gasoline in your car and diesel in your truck. Beautiful, eh? That's great. It's a great plan, isn't it?
It is, yeah, I guess. But they do when they process the corn. What's left over is used as feed. It's called DDG or whatever they ship out.
Okay.
They use it in a mix as feed. Just later, I don't agree with all the green nonsense. And another thing, if you're going to start reducing fertilizer, one crop that's affected a big time by that would be corn. Corn takes a lot of nitrogen to grow.
Yes. And what about soybeans? Don't soybeans take a lot of energy as well?
No, not as much. You don't need to feed soybeans nitrogen; they make their own. But you do have to apply potash to them. It's not
because isn't it one of the reasons that more and more farmers were growing corn is because you can get more tonnage per acre than in many other crops. But isn't it true that you can now get more tonnage in soybeans than even with corn?
Oh God, no. Corn on a good land around Canada, Richmond area, you can get like 5.5 tons to the acre on a good year.
Okay.
Soybeans on a really good year, you'll get 2.
Okay. Thank you very much. Clear that up for me. Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate these calls, folks. It helps clarify it in my mind, and I'm sure some of yours as well. This is what we need. Thank you very much. Thank you. John, I got to get a word in here for our good friends up in Pakenham. We're going to visit Pakenham tomorrow. My wife and I will make our monthly trip up to Pakenham, not for appliances. We have all the appliances that we need, but some more pigeon food. Our pigeons, you know what we have discovered, actually, I couldn't understand why my pigeons are eating so much food. I discovered to my dismay that much of this food is being consumed not by pigeons, but by freaking chipmunks that are getting in there. They're coming.
That shocks nobody.
Oh, they're coming out. My sister-in-law, who helps me look after them, she saw a chipmunk the other day, and his cheeks were about to look like bowling ball, 2 bowling balls, with all of my pigeon food. They love me at the five span feed store in Pakenham. But I do want to get a good word in here for our good friends at Shields, because if you're in the market for appliances or for any Sony electronics for that matter, Shields is the place to go. Very reasonably priced, very competitive priced, good finance plans, and it's in stock. No long delay. And I guess maybe one of the best things, you know what? You're dealing with local people, local family. You're not shipping the money off to China or Timbuktu. Does Timbuktu still exist? Shields certainly does continue to exist and do very well. Thank you, John.
It's Timbuk one quarter now. They've had to cut back on everything they do there.
Okay.
Trudeau thing. Yes, they cut trees down to grow more corn to create fuel for cars, but want us to cut CO2 emissions, says Kellyanne. Does this not make sense? The big plan, says Glenn, grow corn for biofuels, so get rid of gas cars, then we'll have corn to eat. The more electric cars, the more corn we will have to eat. That is the big plan, according to him.
Well, you won't have. I mean, if we're converting corn into fuel, it's not available to eat. As long as I know, we're not eating gasoline, unless you're sniffing it. I don't know. Go ahead.
Oh, jeez. Kim says even ethanol uses oil as a base. Only a certain percentage is derived from the corn. Let's go to text 613-413-2217. This person says, yes, using ethanol in the gas is ridiculous. It's hard on the internal rubber seals and does not run very well in cold weather in small machines.
I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to get into that. I went through this several years ago. That's not what I want to deal with now is what this is doing to food crops. Food for Canadians, food for the world. We are instead, you would think that we would be producing more and more food. But if this continues, we're going to be producing less and less food for humans, food for cars. Yes, go ahead.
All right, let's go to email, lowell@blasttheradio.com. By the way, thank you for sharing this, everybody, on social media. Thank you. Les says, no sense at all, green, crazy government. They definitely do not care about Canadians. There seems to be little we can do about it. Throw these guys all out of office. All right, again, not answering your question directly, but that is the comment. Mike says, he's doing that and also cutting fertilizer in half. This does not make any sense to me at all.
No, fertilizer is being reduced by 30%. The farmers say, listen, if you reduce fertilizer by 30%, you're going to have to reduce crops by 30%. And as Chris, who is on a farm, pointed out, corn requires a lot of fertilizer. It's a heavy user of fertilizer. So Here, we're demanding that we grow more and more corn, not for humans, but for gasoline, and at the same time, we're restricting the amount of corn that can be grown per acre because we're restricting the amount of fertilizer you can apply. It's madness of the first degree. Go ahead, John.
Terry earlier said, can we not just use bugs and crickets? And then moments ago, David says their answer, of course, is to feed us insects instead of regular food. So a few people on the same page there. I've got a question. Okay, so the only part of the corn that I ever eat is the little yellow corn kernels that come off the
Sure.
corn on the cob. Is that the part that actually burns and becomes the fuel, or is
Oh
it
no,
the
it's
other
the
part of the
stalk.
stock?
Yeah.
So can we not have the best of both worlds then? Can we not feed humans and then have us
Well,
compost?
yeah, but before you go further, the food that the corn and the cob, that's a different brand of corn. Okay, that's not 99% of all the corn grown in Canada is not for it is not for corn cob. Okay,
Okay.
it's for animal feed. It's supposed to be for animal feed, um, and as I say, some food production. No, it's two different animals that we're talking about here. The corn you eat is a different breed of corn.
Fair enough. I am getting one amazing education. I'm so I'm such a city boy. It's not even funny. It becomes even more apparent every time we talk about
Well,
agriculture.
at least you know that we don't grow the food at Loblaws, right?
No, it kills me that people actually believe that. Okay, Coralian, that's ridiculous. Growing food to burn, using corn for fuel for cars is very inefficient. Corn should be used to feed people and animals, not vehicles. Clifford, unbelievable what they are doing to our farmers.
Let me just deal with this because I think there's still confusion in people's minds. If you are feeding corn to animals, then you are actually creating human food. If it's dairy cattle, you're drinking the milk, and when the cattle, and then later on the meat, beef cattle, obviously. So,
Well, that's assuming the person's not vegan, right?
same with poultry. Poultry eats a lot of corn, pigs, etc., etc. So, if you're, what I'm saying to you is that whether you are actually consuming the corn yourself, corn flakes,
Right.
or you are eating bacon, this is comes from corn. Okay, so corn fed to livestock is corn for human food. It's converted into human food.
I got you.
Okay.
Yep. Nope. Thank you. These biofuels are not good. Oh no, we're talking about engines. We're going to move on. Yep. Corleen says most people do not even know what biofuels are. Well, keep listening because we're getting a hell of an education here. Joshua says, does a reduction in fertilizer not also mean less crops for biofuels? So Trudeau's green policies aren't really all
Very
that
true.
green friendly.
Yeah, that's right. As Chris pointed out, in particular, corn requires a lot of fertilizer. And if we reduce fertilizer in a cornfield, that means in all probability that acre of land is able to produce probably about 30% less corn. So if you're going to provide the biofuel that's required, you have to have more and more acreage in corn, not into other crops. Go ahead.
Michelle says, remember, they want to reduce animal agriculture as well, so the need for silage will reduce. That's what they want. That's why they want us eating bugs. More corn for cars means less corn for animal feed, which in turn means less food for
Very
us.
true. Thank you very much. Yeah, very true. I think a lot of people get confused. Well, we're feeding corn to humans, or I'm sorry, we're feeding corn to animals. Yeah, but we eat the animal, or we consume the animal products. We consume the eggs. We consume bacon. We consume milk. That's all, and much of it produced by corn. But if more and more corn is not being used to feed animals, then it's less and less if to feed humans as well. Go ahead, John.
We've got about 4 comments left, and we're just about out of time. So this
Fire
works
away.
well. Yeah, Bill says Sri Lanka banned nitrogen fertilizer, and now their people are starving. Kelly says gasoline with ethanol is not efficient. Oh, there we are again talking about engines. Dominic says I was listening to the interview with Andrew Scheer, NDP, with Evan Solomon yesterday. And Andrew Scheer is not NDP. Anyway, with Evan Solomon yesterday, and he was hammering Pierre Poilievre's party. And as Trudeau will give more HST rebates, but then with the same breath, having Liberal NDP spend millions more towards the dental plan.
Let's deal with something else, okay?
I just read them, Lowell. You know that.
I know that.
We've been trying to stop this madness but so far have not had any success in educating our fellow Canadians, says Anne. And James, last word goes to you, paying farmers not to farm as well.
I just want to before we go, I just want to assure everybody that chocolate milk does not come from chocolate-covered cows. Okay?
What?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. And I'm going to tell you something else. The bacon that you buy at the store, it's not grown at the store. Thank you all. Back tomorrow.
The Lowell Green Show is seen and heard live around the world at 2 p.m. Eastern. Connect with us online at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Download the Lowell Green podcast. Available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. Ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green podcast. This is a production of blasttheradio.com.